I'm Nina Bell with Marketing Profs, and thank you for being here. Before we get started, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go over. If you lose audio or visuals, you can try to exit Zoom and come right back to reset your connection. You can ask questions or send comments using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen as you think of them. We'll hear from Nipul and Steve, and then we'll go into our Q&A session and we'll answer as many questions as we can. Now I'd like to take a minute to thank Dun & Bradstreet for sponsoring today's broadcast. Dun & Bradstreet, the global leader in commercial data and analytics, enables companies around the world to improve their business performance. Its data cloud fuels solutions and delivers insights that empower customers to accelerate revenue, lower cost, mitigate risk, and transform their businesses. I'm excited to introduce Nipul Chokshi and Steve Scotkin. Nipul Chokshi is Vice President of Marketing for Dun & Bradstreet, sales responsible for integrated marketing, product positioning, and sales enablement. Prior to Dun & Bradstreet, Nipul built and ran the solutions marketing and sales enablement functions at Yammer. Steve Scotkin is Senior Director of Enterprise Marketing Technology at Thomson Reuters, where he's driving the company's digital transformation through an end-to-end MarTech and data strategy. His prior experience includes tenures at Microsoft and Oracle in marketing ops leadership roles. Alrighty, you are all here for top 3 keys to unlock revenue operations value. Nipul, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Nina. Really great to be here. It wouldn't be 2020 if we didn't have a little bit of a glitch in our tech. So our other speaker is joining, but I will certainly kick it off here. Everyone, I'm really excited to be here today and to really be kind of the opening act, as it were, for Steve Scotkin from Thomson Reuters. I'll start out with a little bit of context, and then I'll turn it over to him to talk about how revenue operations at Thomson Reuters thinks about data and maximizing its value for their business. As a so we all know that data is really the lifeblood of any go-to-market effort in the enterprise. Revenue operations teams spend an inordinate amount of time gathering, cleaning, and wrangling data. But how should we as revenue operations professionals think about managing customer data and maximizing its value in our go-to-market efforts? When you break it down, data and operations teams want to deliver the highest quality data and insights needed to drive intelligent actions from a sales and marketing standpoint. All of us are really looking to do really 4 things, right? So first, from a data standpoint, we want to make sure that we've got a clean set of data, high quality data that's enriched with insights that we might be getting from third-party sources and so on and so forth. At the same time, we want to unify those first and third-party sources so that we can get a 360-degree view of the customer. Third, we want to analyze the data, and we want to identify those golden nuggets, those insights, as it were, that's going to enable us to take action, that's going to enable us to engage buyers in a differentiated way, that's going to enable us to, reach out and target buyers with the right offers at the right time via the right channel. Identifying high propensity targets, understanding white space, and that sort of thing. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we can deliver these data and insights to downstream systems, whether it's your marketing automation system, your CRM system, and so on and so forth. So how do you actually put this kind of framework into action? What I want to do now is turn it over to Steve. Steve runs marketing technology at Thomson Reuters. Really excited to have him share their story of how RevOps thinks about data and how they are able to maximize the value of data to be able to drive value for their go-to-market efforts. Steve?
Does sound like Steve is still dropped, so Nipul, you may just have to fill in.
Awesome. So I'll do my best here. Obviously I work at Dun & Bradstreet. Thomson Reuters is a customer of ours. Just in terms of, Thomson Reuters, so I'll do it justice until Steve joins here. Thomson Reuters, in case you all didn't know, it's a very storied brand. It's been around for a while, operating on a global basis. They've transformed to almost a digital first business model, that was really started as part of a restructure that they had in 2018, back in 2018. And so from a MarTech standpoint, they've got a dedicated team driving digital technology stack channels and strategy, with responsibility for driving governance. Ultimately, Steve's team is really, serves as a trusted advisor to the business when it comes to, identifying and managing and delivering on a MarTech platform and a best-in-breed solution strategy to make their sales and marketing efforts successful. Okay. And so ultimately, like from a RevOps standpoint, the idea here is that Steve's team was really charged with driving three key goals. First is to help support growth objectives. And to that end, they wanted to be able to leverage internal as well as external data that they were sourcing from third parties, in order to be able to identify new opportunities and drive revenue growth. Second, they wanted to be able to simplify the stack in support of an overall objective around profitability. And then third, there's a drive to digital. The digital transformation, engaging with buyers via digital channels, that's been something that we've always engaged in, and Thomson Reuters is certainly always engaged in. Obviously this year, that's just kind of accelerated. And so ultimately from a RevOps standpoint, they found that, there were three key pillars that they were really affecting as a result. Okay. And so ultimately, when it comes to value realization, what Thomson Reuters did was really what a lot of our customers will do, is they'll kind of look at things from a technology standpoint, as well as the things that you need from a people and process standpoint. I love this kind of framework that they put together. It's almost like a maturity curve that served as a roadmap for Steve's team as they were embarking down this journey of being able to take control of the data, resource, and assets they had, and to be able to drive value for the business. They kind of started with on the left-hand side, being purely operational, almost like a stage one maturity, if you will, where while there were siloed operations, manual processes, and almost like a fragmented customer experience, that was almost a starting point for them to then drive further digitization as part of the curve. And so ultimately, this was a great roadmap for them to ultimately drive value from a data standpoint. What this really translated.
Hey, Steve here.
Hey, Steve.
Can you hear me okay?
I wasn't doing you justice.
I'm really sorry, everyone. I've had some technical issues today. It sort of goes with the year and our virtual environment. So my sincerest apologies. But Nipul, you were doing a great job. I'll just elaborate a couple of points on how we got here and are leveraging this framework. I mean, it was really important that as an organization going through digital transformation and having a lot of change management around our future, that we were looking at our own capabilities and making the right investments and readying our people. And so we wanted to look at the reality of where we were in terms of our readiness, understanding to what extent we had the right talent and the right skills. And so then this is we call it a marketing technology maturity framework, but it really became kind of a digital maturity framework for us collectively. And if you look at each of these stages, there's really two things to take away. One is data, the other one is automation. So the more that we have data, and we have data that's available and is able to be used across the ecosystem, the more successful we can be with personalizing, the more successful we can be with having data-driven capabilities that then contribute to the automation. And as Nipul was pointing out, when we started our journey roughly 18 months ago, we declared that we were somewhere between operational and digitized, so that we could put the right priorities in place and make the right investments to start our journey. Moving into data and building our data foundation was priority number one. And we'll talk more about that, but I just want to kind of put this into context, because when you start looking at the ability to do personalization, the ability to be data driven, it's really impossible if you don't the first step, having a data environment. And that for us was our customer data platform. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So when we think about our go-to-market stack, we look at it in these four areas. First is our experience layer, second is orchestration, and then data, and then on the side is our operations hub. And what this enables us to do in terms of that framework is to make, again, the appropriate investments, and also explain how these things all work together. A MarTech stack is complicated. Data systems themselves are complicated, and if you have a way to reference them and to show how these are being used across experiences, enabling employee experiences, and then driving efficiency and maybe what could be consolidation of more scaled capabilities, we want to look at all of our end-to-end go-to-market capabilities, our end-to-end customer journeys and customer experiences, using the appropriate capabilities and referencing them along the way. So this is the view of what would be the capability areas. And then if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, what I've done to help explain how, whether it's part of revenue ops, part of the MarTech stack, all together marketing operations, how we work together, it's by creating personas and explaining what is a journey for a customer or an employee. And so the one that I wanted to talk about here today is how we're using our customer data platform, or CDP. And we look at this from two angles. One is that we have a lot of operations that have dependency on the customer data platform as our asset to determine our segmentation, to determine our marketable universe, to look at our addressable audiences, and to really do our planning. And then we have the customer who then receives our communication and engagement as a result of using that asset. So we have two personas here. One is Mary and one is Ahmad. So Mary is a marketer, and she's been asked to put together a campaign for a product launch in Chicago. And so we're going to look at how Mary is going along that journey. And then we have Ahmad, who is an existing customer who we want to target and get to that same event. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So we'll first talk about Mary's experience. So the first thing that Mary has to do, if we could maybe just build out that first portion, that'd be helpful. Yeah, great, thank you. So the first thing that Mary needs to do is look at the new product line and determine what kind of customers, what sort of capabilities we have around a particular product set in our database. So the way that we put our database together to enable that type of profiling and mining for customer information, we brought in kind of four core internal sources: CRM, our purchase history, or what is effectively subscription information for our own products. Then we have our marketing activities and what are other prospects as part of that. And then we have first party additional intelligence. We have our own propensity models. We have our own other indicators that would be used to help with segmentation and also to understand customer behavior. When we bring all that together into our customer data platform, we overlay that with things like our single customer view, privacy, and then create segmentation from that. That segmentation becomes available to our marketers. It becomes available to our different RevOps teams to be able to do sizing and also do hygiene and all those kind of activities ongoing. And then ultimately, from a marketer who's built a plan, now we're able to fulfill and do appropriate sizing of that universe. And so then what Mary's able to see is that she has enough people and enough targets to essentially go to market with that campaign effort. So taking our data, centralizing it, providing standardization, creating a segmentation engine, and then being able to train up our marketers, train up all of the components of marketing and revenue operations around using a common tool set has then enabled this to be a standard practice. So then the next piece of this is how we reach Ahmad. And there's kind of different points here. So we have an omni-channel stack, and the beauty of having a central data environment is that you're able to start to activate appropriately in that omni-channel stack. So our first point of activation was to drive some form of outbound email, but we've also allowed for Ahmad to come visit our website to learn that there is actually an event. And so while that happened, we're able to look at his behavior. We're able to leverage our web stack and our targeting capabilities using our data management platform to then further understand who that individual is and build a digital segment, which then we can use the first party profile information to merge in with what we've learned from his online behavior on our website. And then we're able to not only send an outbound email, we're able to further personalize after we have him return to not only then attend the event, but then to get further and more richer personalized engagement. So, to bring it together, our CDP provides our core profile, and then we have other aspects of our web ecosystem that then enable us to collect more information and connect that first party to this capability set, which then creates a consistent experience. It allows us to have personalization at the right channel, and ultimately use one view of the customer to facilitate all that. And so to bring it back to our framework. So in this particular journey, we used our customer data platform. We used our analytics and reporting capabilities. We used information from intent and marketing automation and our CRM systems. And then ultimately to put this together, we also, and I didn't have a reference too much in the other slides, but we also have a very robust workflow orchestration capability that then brought all those things together to give us that final output. As we're driving a data-driven culture and transforming how our marketers think, transforming how we do things smarter and use intelligence, it's also important to use these sort of tools, like the slides that we just went through, to help educate them and to build confidence with them. If you go to the next slide. So we're trying to create better data literacy, which I assume a lot of people can appreciate that that's not necessarily native to a lot of marketers. It could even be considered frightening. Salespeople like to have information fed to them that's accurate and that's available. But we're also trying to help people understand how these different tools work, how data works to enable this connected and more advanced way of doing business. And being digital means that you are being able to bring together all this and understand how it works. You're able to orchestrate it, and you're able to understand what data can be used to affect which kind of action. And so this is it shouldn't really be considered a data diagram, but what it allows us to do with our marketers and our sellers and our revenue ops partners is to understand what data comes from which MarTech system and what are the ways that they connect to each other at just kind of a categorical level. So if you wouldn't mind just building the rest of this out. So again, in this case, we brought together marketing automation, CRM information. We had digital data that came in from our web experience. And we're just showing here how those different experiences that were resonated from the other journey slide are come together and are collectively used to go into those two channels. So if we can go to the next one. Obviously this is not something that we can do overnight. It very much took a lot of strategic planning on where we want it to be with a North Star. It required really understanding the core of what were the challenges we're trying to solve and how we got onto the journey of being able to drive to understanding our customers better, having a 360 view. What we started with very siloed customer and basically no data sources that were reliable. They were scattered within their native systems. So you had marketing using our marketing automation system, and that was a data repository. You had sellers using CRM systems without having the connection to marketing. There were other what would be considered web-only type of engagement that wasn't connected to the customer. And our goal was to take that and to bring some value and connect it. We had a lot of manual processes because we were working in each of those systems in a silo. And that means that you do something to execute the communication to a customer, and then you do something else in a different system without having integrations between the two and without having continuity. And we had a lot of our resource investment in really just manning these systems and operating. Not a lot of time for strategy, not a lot of time for experimentation and learning. And you can't be intelligent with your customers. You can't give them a world-class experience if you're just plugging holes and driving towards execution. And ultimately, that's what that led to, was that you had employees working in silos, you had customers that were getting fragmented engagement, and we needed to really address that. And we knew that the data was the foundation. So we moved from our operational state to our connected state. We now have a single unified data source with a 360 view of the customer. Building that, again, was our first and foundational move. It allowed us to also think about, how do you automate, how do you integrate, how do you move data between systems so that it's not only seamless, but then it allows for a much better coordination, not only to how you work with a customer, how you reach a customer, but also enabling the workflows in our own day-to-day operations, which is really important when you think of creating scale. And that was one of our main objectives. The ability to be agile, be more responsive with a quicker time to market. Very interesting to see how in 9 months we went from being very manual to then being able to experiment and to start to personalize and to learn from personalization and bring those learnings back. And then we're able to see better ROI, not only out of our infrastructure, but then even on our marketing and our sales investments as well. And when you have the ability to orchestrate like that, and you've built out pipelines to your different parts of your stack, then the ability to have omni-channel campaign personalization, having consistent tactics and an elegant customer experience is what emerges from that. And I don't think that our journey is by any means done, but we are focusing on optimizing. We're not focusing on kind of building this core anymore. And it's now the exciting part where we could see tuning and truly driving better results or driving better customer engagement as the things that we're focused on now. If we can go to the next slide. So, the way I would reflect on this is, you really have to have a North Star, and having a clear outcome, whether that's a short-term outcome, whether that's a 2-3 year plan. In our case, I started with about the 12 to 18 month plan, but I knew that we had to have a unified data platform, and we had to have integrations between our core systems, which was marketing automation, CRM, and what effectively would be data and workflow. We had to drive alignment, not only between our different portions of our RevOps team, but then deeper within our marketing organization, build connectivity between our marketers and sales objectives, and ultimately get our executives aligned that we're going to take these right steps. We're going to use a measured way to look at those priorities and measure ourselves on the maturity and progress we're making towards that North Star. When we start to prove things out, people get excited, people start to get behind it. And so we have to think about demonstrating value through minimum viable products. These kind of transformations are not big bangs. They are iterative. They are it's very important to make small steps to bring people along and to help them contribute to it, to have them buy into it, and to have them slowly understand how to be more data driven and how to be more technical driven. We have to then have insights that drive for what would be the alignment and unification and availability of our data to then better inform intelligence. So being able to define that ecosystem and then have that become unified and ingrained in how we operate, allow for the different parts of revenue ops to come together and understand how to even have a conversation and have a reliable way of understanding metrics and way of understanding our customers. And then if you take all of this together, you have to have a data strategy. And that could mean many things to many people. I like to think of it in sort of a very simplified way, which is that you need to have data that is reliable. It needs to be available. And as part of its availability, it needs to be prescribed in how it's used to activate. If you have data and you don't know how to activate it, then you have a different problem, because then you don't have channels, you don't have the go-to-market capability. So just building a CDP or building a data environment does not really end the journey. It's enabling the foundation. But then you have to be able to activate and have a strategy for how it's being leveraged and do that in parallel. Otherwise, you end up with a really robust car that you can't really put gas into. And then the last piece of it is having excellent partners and a way to create scale so that when you start somewhere, you're not then stuck with, oh, I built this MVP. It needs to be something that's progressive. And the partners, whether there's a third-party partners that enable data, that enable your platform, or your first-party partners that are contributing to that and helping provide a 360-degree view of a customer, all those pieces have to be in place. It's an ecosystem, and it has to be constantly fed, and it has to be evolved, and it has to be treated as an asset. So data strategy lays all those different things out, but you have to bring it together and have a single roadmap for what maturity of a data asset in your data environment is as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. That was great. Definitely glad you were able to you were able to join. I especially like the fact that when it came to your initiatives from a RevOps standpoint, you started with kind of the end in mind, right, with the well-defined outcomes. But as you went through the process, you tied it back to those outcomes, and not necessarily you didn't necessarily take a technology-centric approach, if you will. So I know we've got a bunch of questions coming in. Nina, do you want to just kind of walk down the questions, and Steve and I can answer those?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks to you both for that awesome presentation. If anybody has a burning question for Nipul or Steve, now is the time to send it in using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So we will go ahead and get started on the questions that have come in so far. And Nipul and Steve, you can just decide amongst yourselves who wants to grab what question after I ask it. And the first one is thinking back to the slides that we're talking about Ahmad's customer experience. The question is, what team structure do you have in place that works on the data consolidation in the CDP before deployment for Ahmad's customer experience?
Well, I'll take that. And just to clarify, is it more of the execution team, or is it more of the data enablement? Because I'll preface it, then we can dive deeper. I run a team of product managers that's then focusing on different aspects of our technology stack, and to put in place all of the data operations, the continuation of features and partnership on what we're rolling out. That's a product management responsibility. And I have essentially one product manager that focuses on our customer data platform. They treat it as a product, and they work very closely, obviously, with the platform itself. And then there's marketing automation teams that are end users. And then that is a function of working in agile marketing defined pods to then decide what type of segmentation or criteria is needed for a particular initiative. So I'm happy to go deeper into any of those too, but those are essentially the users, and then you have the enablers.
All right, we just had an interesting one pop in from Ruth asking, do you think revenue operations specialists can be paid on some kind of performance basis? If so, what metrics would best reflect their performance?
I'm happy to share. Yeah, I'm happy to share based on what I've seen from customers. Steve, would love to get your thoughts as well in terms of best practices around how you're doing it. What we've generally found is, from a RevOps standpoint, in terms of performance, there is an element. It's not the only thing that is a driver of their compensation. Obviously, there's definitely an element of how well the campaigns perform and how well marketing overall achieves its objective. That generally is a part of the overall incentive structure that we've observed across our customers. I mean, that's also kind of what we do at D&B as well with our revenue operations team. Steve, did you have any comments you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll add in a little bit of context, and I'll also offer a bit of my own perspective or opinion, if you will. The way that we look at alignment to revenue, whether right now it's truly considered part of your compensation. I mean, there's hard targets for marketers, but B, I carry a target for number of leads as well as for helping attain certain revenue through systems. It doesn't mean that I'm hard measured on it. There's obviously influenced revenue when it comes to operations, and there's also different types of success criteria with enabling a particular customer journey, which then has a revenue outcome. So in the world of operations, that's currently in place with Thomson Reuters. I would say that, and this is more kind of my own opinion, in order for the model to shift, where you have people who are directly experimenting and actively doing something to affect revenue, the evolution of how we go from a marketing to a sales model has to very much shift in how much marketing plays a role directly with a customer. In the B2B, when you're selling commercial software or large subscription products, unless there's a truly 100% digital experience, you still have a dependency on a seller or an account and a relationship manager of some sort to either close the deals or in some way to grow that business. So there has to be more of a truly digital end-to-end capability for people that are orchestrating, creating data, creating experiences to be able to say, yeah, I can say that I'm 100% responsible, and so I'm able to take my compensation model and shift it. We are using influence today to start to bridge that, which I think is very important, because if you're at least targeted around some sort of revenue, some sort of customer target, it's more than just what's the result of your campaign in terms of its effectiveness. It puts a lot more skin in the game, and it makes the agile squads responsible for these marketing campaigns far more motivated at seeing optimization. And that's the behavior we want to see. And if they're showing optimization and they're rewarded for it, but not necessarily on kind of a quota basis. So that's kind of my color and opinion of that.
Okay, we've had a couple of people, it sounds like, who are here from small or medium-sized businesses, and so I'm going to kind of group these into one question because it's kind of the same idea. People are wondering, to what extent does the framework that you've talked about apply, and how do you see the maturity model changing for someone who is a smaller business with a less robust marketing and marketing ops organization?
I mean, I think the maturity itself might not change. Like, what are the different definitions? It's just what level of scale it is. And I mean, there's a much easier way of getting to, truly automated journeys. Whereas we're coordinating with very large sales organizations that have an abundance of different tools and much more complexity in pulling off a sale. So I think you'd scale back what would be some of these channels, probably scale back the level of maybe what are complex integrations and go more for solutions that get you around you want to be more than operational as fast as possible. And I think even if you're at the kind of connected to digitized mix, there's ways that just looking at the right technologies and having a few key operators who understand those core capabilities could get it done. It doesn't mean that you're going to go all the way to the right, but I do think that there's a pretty good tool set that would fit a smaller team's use to accelerate growth. I think the most important thing is creating consistency. Irrespective of your company size, that will create engines that are repeatable, they're reliable, and there's processes that can be defined that help create that kind of momentum and the ability to reach customers and to rinse and repeat. That's the most important thing, as long as you have some kind of a data foundation and the few of the key systems that enable a digitized set of capabilities.
Yeah, and that's similar to what we've observed as well. I mean, obviously, Dun & Bradstreet, I'm going to provide more of a technology provider perspective on this, right? But based on what we've seen from our customer base, it's very similar to what Steve describes. Right. What that means operationally is, a lot of times people just get started with, for example, improving data quality on one or two data sources, right? And they'll use just kind of a file-based cleaning mechanism, right? So everything isn't necessarily integrated, but then, they'll just kind of, make sure that they're able to get the data from the different systems, make sure that they are cleaned. Then what they'll do is they'll leverage, third-party data management and data quality systems to kind of clean and enrich that data in real time. Then what they'll do is they'll, bring in additional third-party data directly by sourcing it from third-party sources. Then they'll, leverage customer data platforms to kind of unify that data. So, corresponding to kind of the people, process, and capability perspective that Steve was talking about, the underlying kind of technology journey in terms of the tools that the RevOps folks would use to enable that corresponds as well. And depending on where you are in terms of, your appetite, as well as your maturity from a company standpoint, you can kind of pick and choose where you start.
All right, we've had an interesting one that just came in from someone who sounds like they're pretty well drinking your Kool-Aid and they're ready to jump in. Wondering, Steve, were you hired to bring this initiative forward as part of the organization's plan to begin their digital transformation journey, or did you already work for the organization? So essentially, if someone wants to start and they want to hire a you, what title do they need to hire for?
That's a good question. I mean, let me answer.
Job offer.
Awesome. We can definitely take that one offline. No, but when I was being approached by Thomson Reuters, they declared digital transformation. It was already an initiative. Now, it was very early stage. I was brought in specifically to manage what was marketing technology. But when I found out what the role was, it was to be like effectively the CMO CIO, or the chief digital officer CIO, the way however you want to think about it. And so it wasn't just to go manage a MarTech stack, but it was to drive what would be the relationships, understand the strategy, or build the strategy. So I don't know that I would necessarily say it has to be someone that is a marketing technology or digital go-to-market stack leader. But the thing that made me unique for this role is that I also had a very extensive background in data and was able to help the company understand the value of starting there. So that, and that's not something that I would say is specific to a title. I do think that someone that has data and technology experience is probably the right hire to start to lead what is a digital transformation strategy. So I would say for me, I came in and accelerated areas that didn't necessarily have emphasis before. But I think it was the right place at the right time because the company was actually very serious and committed to making that transformation too. Otherwise, I could have been hired and had a lot of great ideas, and that wouldn't have gotten us where we are.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
I think so. I feel answered. There's one that's actually, I was wondering during your presentation as well, something you mentioned. What did you mean by both the employee experience and the customer experience being improved?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, this particular set of use cases or the personas that I brought forth into the presentation today were around data. I have many other use cases that's enabling employees to do their work better. So creating a system where they capture attribution, systems that are enabling workflow, enabling creation of our assets. Like there's digital asset management, there's things like content management systems. Employees that are doing work to enable a customer experience or just get their day-to-day activities complete have a tool stack. And so there's internal facing tools that enable efficiency. Even think about a marketing automation manager who now has a data platform below their marketing automation system is far more efficient and more capable than just working with data set being an Eloqua alone. And so for us, we think about it as what happens from a customer perspective, but how am I able to improve how employees get their work done and what tools are available to them as well. So it's a two-pronged set of capabilities, and we always look at from a readiness perspective: is the tool that we're bringing in going to be operatable? When you think about the revenue ops function, you have to have someone that can easily use the tool set and can do it well. And if the features, functionality, or the way that it would work within your organization don't align, then you're going to still have an employee experience issue. And the goal would be to solve for an employee experience, and then ultimately that would reflect positively in what would be the customer experience.
Yep, makes sense. We are coming up on time, but I'm going to slip one more question in because I'm being selfish. And this is something that I ask myself every day as a demand gen manager. So I want to get your quick take on it if you can. How do you advise B2B marketers to divide their efforts between new account acquisition and current account penetration?
I mean, I don't know if I'm the most qualified to advise them, to be honest, but
go for it. Give it a go.
I'll give you my perspective, and this is kind of a way to think about it at sort of how I was partnering closely with our marketing strategy and our digital strategy teams. There are different things that we have to do as priorities. And if you can take data and intelligence and enable both of those, we're going to do acquisition, but we're going to have a finite set of tools and a finite set of scenarios and how we go do that. And then we have things like, whether it's marketing to accounts, let's not use the term ABM, but really having an account oriented maybe it's a upsell, cross-sell, or just even continue relationship building with current customers. You sort of have to do both. And so for me, it's what are our biggest pain points collectively? Let's solve those. Let's prescribe the right tool sets to do your different jobs. I don't know that I'd be best positioned at talking about the proportion, but both are important. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I mean, to me, there still has to be this prescribed set of capabilities that allow you to do both and drive it to one revenue engine.
Yep, makes sense. All right, and we are, oh, you got something to add?
No, just real quick, like, yeah, I mean, like in terms of the proportions, you know, between new customer acquisition versus existing customers, I mean, that's obviously very specific to the business, right? You know, one thing that, again, just kind of working with different CMOs and RevOps folks, again, the more you're tightly aligned with the overall corporate strategy, the better it is. Now, to Steve's point, there's different capabilities and different tools that you use for new customer acquisition versus existing customer, and you'll use different data and different signals for targeting and segmentation as well, right? But ultimately, you really need to start with, you know, kind of how is this aligned with the overall corporate strategy and objectives, and where does the company really, you know, from a sales and marketing standpoint, see that growth coming from? Because if you're, you know, companies that have been in market for a while, there are a lot of our customers who are, you know, their big growth lever is just selling into, you know, the million strong customers that they have. And so it's a no-brainer for them to do, you know, programs into existing customers. And then we also work with smaller companies and companies in new markets where, you know, you don't really have a customer base. So it's a no-brainer to work with and go after net new customer acquisition. And just kind of figuring out, you know, if you're somewhere in the middle, it just, again, comes down to what is the overall objective and the corporate goals that you have, you know, and that's, again, working closely with sales and your executive team on that.
And with that, we are out of time. Thanks, guys, for that awesome presentation. Thanks again